Kasia? Okay. So you started. A very warm welcome, everyone. It's wonderful that you joined us today. So since it is 10 a.m., we'll get started right on time, as we have a very packed and exciting schedule ahead. And to those who are still joining, welcome. My name is Sylwia Timoszuk. I'm going to be your moderator today. And it's a huge pleasure to welcome you all to our webinar titled No Land Without Old People, Social Inclusion in Changing Salinized Landscapes. So we have two speakers today, and I'm personally very excited to hear from them. It's Dr. Sandra Heaney-Mustafa from the University of Canberra, and Dr. Bastian Branning from the SALT Doctors. I would like to start by underlining that this is not a typical webinar when we hear research results, research reports. Instead, our speakers are going to share exciting, very interesting and unique first-hand observations from years of fieldwork in Pakistan and Egypt. So the whole idea is to spark a conversation, and that's where you, our participants, come in. We encourage you to write your questions, your ideas, reflections during the presentations in the chat. And afterwards, after the presentations, we have 20-minute discussion. If we have a lot, I hope, if we have a lot of questions and reflections, then we are going to use Gemini AI to synthesize those ideas and to focus on the main themes. If not, we are going to go one by one through your questions. And just a quick technical note before we begin. You might have realized it already. The webinar is being recorded and is going to be available on the CoSEAL YouTube channel. If during the discussion, when you are going to be unmute and you can participate in the discussion, you probably, that's my technical understanding, your name is not going to show up, so you don't have to be stressed about that. But just in case, know that this is all being recorded. And and the last, I said all the technical things. So thank you all again for being here. Let's get ready for our two fantastic presentations. Without further ado, Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can everybody see that?
No, we can't see your screen yet. Can you try to share it again?
What have I done it again? What have I done?
No worries. Let's give it a try again, and if no, we'll try to help. That's looking good.
That's looking good.
Now we can see the Zoom. So if we can move to the presentation.
How's that?
Yeah, perfect.
That
and
better?
It's in the
Okay.
Yes, everything.
Thank you. Well, good morning or good evening to all. It's evening for me here in Australia. And tonight I'm not at my usual location, which is the University of Canberra, because I'm leaving for Pakistan tomorrow. So I'm up in Sydney. And as is the custom and the tradition in Australia, we always acknowledge the land of the Indigenous people on which we stand. And tonight I'm actually on the Cabrogal clan land of the Darug Nation, which is in the western area of Sydney. But the University of Canberra is on Nungan land. So I would like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging from both the Cabrogal and the Nungan lands. As you know, I've been a researcher at Canberra for about the last 16 years, last 25 years at Canberra, but working in Pakistan for the last 16. I have a background in nursing, and why am I doing an agricultural project escapes me. But there you have it, I am. My area of interest is really in adult education and community-led initiatives. I'd like to tell you a little story about a farmer in Pakistan, Abdul Haq, and you'll see him in this first image where he's actually in a classroom, a very formal classroom. He's one of the farmers that we have taught how to teach. And like all people who learn how to teach, he was doing his practice teaching session in the classroom at the Mehran University of Engineering and Technology. And had the opportunity there to have other farmers there, to have researchers from the university, and the facilitators who had actually taught him how to teach. And we work with this wonderful organisation in Pakistan called SOFT, which is the Society of Facilitators and Trainers. And here you see him out in the village teaching other farmers. Not only does he teach other farmers, but he's now moved on to teaching farmers in other villages. And so the approach that we use has the potential to scale out to other places. Women, young and old, are also included in our projects. And for the first time in a lot of the villages in Pakistan, women are now actually taking the lead in teaching others within their village, because in Pakistan, women aren't always allowed to travel outside of their village. And so they might work with women in their same village, or some of them, if their husband is going to teach in another village, they will accompany him and teach the women in that village. Ooh, what's that clicking noise I'm hearing? So the method that we use is a bit different to what's been happening in the past. Historically, knowledge has been a communication which has been top-down via extension methods, and that's applied around the world in a lot of places. Researchers develop tools and technologies with the expectations that farmers will adopt them. And when they don't, they get very frustrated. But what I learned on the very first project 16 years ago, in talking to about 400 farmers, I think, over a period of a few weeks, the one thing that almost all of them said to me was, researchers don't research what we need. And so that planted the seed in my mind as to how can we get farmers and people in the villages more engaged in the research process and more engaged in an education process. Over the years, the last 30 or 40 years, there has been growing recognition of the limitations of top-down approaches, and in many places around the world, people have engaged farmers in more practical hands-on experience of learning. The Farmer Field School being one of those prime methods, where indeed the farmers do have more chance to work with what they're learning about. But in 2014, Waddington and his colleagues did a very extensive survey globally to look at how well farmer field school methods had allowed knowledge to be spread. And what they found was the farmers who had been in the farmer field schools had in fact benefited greatly from it. But there was no scale out opportunity. Maybe one farmer would talk to his neighbour and he would benefit. But by and large, there was no scaling out to other areas. So that was another seed that was sown in my mind as to how can we get farmers to teach other farmers? Because in Pakistan, there's in excess of 60 million small farmers, and there's not that many extension agents. And so to get knowledge spread, it has to be through farmers. Globally, there has been a move towards more participatory and collaborative approaches over the years. CoSEAL, or as it was previously known, CEAL, which was the Stakeholder Engagement for Research and Learning, now to become known as Community-led Stakeholder Engagement for Adaptive Livelihoods, is based on some very ancient concepts, in fact, and it uses holistic knowledge. It looks at the fact that knowledge comes from feelings and experience as well as the intellect. And Paulo Freire, a Brazilian educator, was the one who coined that particular phrase. Knowledge comes from feeling and experience as well as the intellect. And we use a co-inquiry method where farmers are viewed as co-researchers, as co-learners at each and every stage in the process. And getting researchers, public servants who make policy about agriculture and water, often disregard the fact that farmers have knowledge. And so one of the biggest battles is getting them to realise that farmers have knowledge, and it's expert knowledge, but it's different to theirs, but it is of equal value. And so that's one of the things that we really work on in the early stages, is making farmers understand that they have knowledge, and in turn making policymakers, researchers, agricultural service providers, all of those people who work with farmers, that they in fact also have knowledge. And I remember in the previous project, the Adapting to Salinity in the Southern Indus Basin, I did some story of change interviews, and I interviewed one of the researchers from a university. And he said to me, when we first went to the villages, we were told we weren't to talk to the farmers were to talk to us first. And we found that very strange and hard to come to. But he said, I learnt rapidly that farmers have knowledge. And as he was talking, he had tears in his eyes. And he said to me, I have been working with farmers for over 30 years, and I have never had relationships with farmers like I have since we started using the stakeholder engagement for research and learning approach to working with them. This isn't new. It goes back to Socrates. Socrates believed that everybody had knowledge, and he taught the boy Meno, who was an illiterate boy in the marketplace running messages for people, that he had knowledge, and he got him to solve quite a complex mathematical problem just by asking him the right questions and reinforcing that he was making the right answers. And so that knowledge comes from within a person and from with their life experience. The CoSEAL approach has 4 benefits. Benefits with having behaviour change, that there's an accelerated behaviour change and adoption of good farming practices and new livelihood skills among smallholder farmers. It increases their motivation, because once they realise they have knowledge, they want to engage in the process more and more. And so there's economic, sociological, cultivation, technical development and acquisition of new income generation skills and markets. It gives them inspiration, farmers learning by exchanging adaptive capacity and changing attitudes towards climate-smart farming. And there's a greater uptake of implementation or adaptation, where they have consensus on scaling innovations of farming practices and sustainability through new agricultural practices and livelihood adaptations. So the CoSEAL model has 3 iterative phases. The first one is the research phase. The second one is a workshop phase. And the third phase is where they put what they've decided to do in the workshop into action. So phase 1, and I point out before I go any further, is that the entire process is based around these skills: respecting, valuing, trusting, sustaining, and being culturally sensitive. We've used a similar approach in Australia with rice farmers, with people who were objecting to having an abattoir built in their community. So it's a widely adaptable model. It's been used by colleagues in Cambodia and Papua New Guinea, although I have taken it and revised it and refined it a little more since then. So this pre-workshop phase, at the beginning, we have very imprecise problem, identification and stakeholder analysis. We don't really know what we're going to face. We don't really understand the context. And so using a variety of research methods, and you adapt your research methods according to where you're working and with whom you're working. So it may involve the local communities and other stakeholders, the man who turns the cock to let the irrigation water run down the channels, the agricultural service providers, the extension agents. And with doing that, it helps us to refine the context in which we're working. It's conducted in the villages. It helps us select which villages we will ultimately work in, what industries are in the area, what services are provided to those villages, and how we can utilize those to work with us. We do research on the researchers, both within the country and outside of the country, once again to help us identify the knowledge of context and issues that they have, and what is their capacity to contribute. How can they help this whole process work? The second phase is the workshop phase. Once again, keeping these principles in mind, we bring all of the stakeholders together, women and youth, farmers, local groups, NGOs that are working already with the farmers, national and international researchers, government departments, facilitators, extension agents and field assistants, agricultural service providers, to name a few. And the workshop's divided into two phases. A divergent phase where we just open the floor up to everybody to share their ideas. And we, at that stage, start to get the problems emerging that each of these different people faces. Because a farmer sees the problem from his position or her position. The government policymaker sees it from their position. The national and international researchers see it from their position. So it's a chance of sharing and exploring ideas with each other to identify problems. And usually by the end of that phase, we get them to identify 2 or maybe 3 key problems that they think are the priorities to be working on. If you're lucky and you've got 2 days, you can get them to have a break overnight. But usually we do it in a morning and an afternoon session. So over lunchtime, we get them to have lunch, of course, but to reflect on what they've been talking about. Did they have a chance to say what they wanted to say? Did we understand what they said? And so the first step in the convergent phase in the afternoon is saying, well, did you feel you were heard? Do you want to change anything? No, that's fine. Yes, we add that in. And then we get them to say, okay, these were the priorities, problems that you chose to work on. How do you want to work on them? What options have we got? Who has the capacity and the resources to share? And by the end of that phase, we've come up with a plan, an action plan for them to work, whether it might be for the policymakers to go and rethink about how they draft their policies. It might be for the agricultural extension agents to rethink how they're teaching farmers. And for the farmers, it may be changing or adapting their practices, or in some cases, because of climate change in Pakistan being so severe, for some, it's not possible for them to continue farming. So it's identifying ways that they could generate an income outside of farming. Phase 3, once again, bearing in mind those key principles, we take them into the action phase. So all of these people have made their plans, they've got their action plan, they've decided who's responsible to do what, they've decided how they're going to evaluate what the outcomes are, and they put it into action. During that phase, if the farmers or the women in the village feel they need some extra support from the researchers, they've built a network through the first workshop, and they can, I think I'm running out of battery here. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you well.
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. They have their plan of what they're going to do, but they might need some support. They might need the local extension agent for that. So having built a good solid network during the workshops, they're able to contact people and get that help. At the end of that phase, and usually we do it over a cropping season, they evaluate what's happened, they reflect on what's happened, what worked, what didn't work, and that then gets fed back into another phase 2 workshop, or sometimes we need to go right back to the beginning and start all over again. So it's a very interactive and a very iterative approach to helping farmers learn. And what we do is we take the farmers after, in the agricultural, in the Adapting to Salinity in the Indus Basin project, what we did after we'd had them for about 2 years was took them to school and taught them to teach. And then in the last 18 months of the project, they were doing most of the teaching, either in their own village or in villages nearby. The women were doing it mostly in their own villages, but quite often going to other villages as well. So that's the whole thing when it all gets put together, with phase 1, the research phase, phase 2, the workshop phase, and phase 3, the reflection phase. And I know it's probably a bit small for you to read, but that's the whole model as it stands at the moment. The current project that I'm going to be working on is a climate adaptation program. And so the model CoSEAL will be refined and developed over that time. So it may change, it may be tweaked a little bit. I look forward to the challenge of it. And I'm off to Pakistan tomorrow to meet with farmers and all sorts of people to help me to do that. The initial model was actually, or the initial approach was actually designed by the farmers in collaboration with some researchers and facilitators and myself. We used 3 different adult learning styles with them. And then we said to them, well, what did you like about each of those approaches? What did you not like about each of those approaches? What should we take into our approach? And so they helped build that first approach, which we called the farmer integrated learning model, because it was about farmer learning about irrigation techniques. Then the farmers helped us refine it in the second project, and they'll help us refine it in this third project. So who knows what we'll end up with at the end of another project. But what I can say is community-led stakeholder engagement for adaptive livelihoods engages whole communities. It exposes wicked or complex problems. It helps to bridge the gap between policymakers, farmers, communities, policymakers, and researchers. It enhances all the stakeholders' knowledge because it is a co-inquiry and a co-learning process. It supports farmer-to-farmer learning, and it helps them to build stronger networks in order to scale up knowledge, and it enables change. So thank you very much for listening. I want to thank the Australian Council for International Agricultural Research, who have funded all these projects. And I want to thank my colleagues who worked on the Adapting to Salinity in the Southern Indus Basin project from Charles Sturt University, CSIRO, CoSEAL, Murdoch University, and our partners in Pakistan, the Mehran University of Engineering and Technology, the Muhammad Nawaz Sharif University of Agriculture in Multan, and the Society of Facilitators and Trainers. But most importantly, I want to thank the men, women, and youth of Pakistan in rural villages who were the inspiration and driving force behind the development over nearly over 4 projects that I've had the privilege to be engaged. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra, for that very, very insightful, very unique presentation. It was really a treat. Now we'll move from that broad perspective to a very concrete example of technology in action. Bas will share a case study on using hydroponics as an adaptation tool in Egypt. And while Bas is presenting, I'd just like to remind everyone to please keep adding your questions and thoughts to the chat so we can gather them and then we can discuss everything after Bas' presentation. Okay, so Bas, the floor is yours. Bas, okay.
Yeah, thanks. I was just trying to share my presentation. I hope it's working now.
Yes, it is. Yes, we can see it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for having me. Thanks a lot to Sandra also for this very interesting talk. And I think I'm gonna, well, refer to it a lot because it was also very insightful for me, also to, I don't know, help placing my own presentation in a broader scope, let's say, because as Sylvia mentioned, I think I have a more case study type of talk, not an overview with a lot of theory on how to do these things, but I hope there is some complementary value in it, in my contribution as well. In any case, the title of my presentation is Adapting to Salinity with Hydroponics, Challenges and Opportunities for Egyptian Farmers. And I think in the title is the essential part of the presentation. It's the hydroponics thing. Because usually I work for a company, the company is called the Salt Doctors, and we go a lot to farmers all over the world and try to teach them how to better deal with salinity issues. But we do that through adapting normal farming methods. So changing the way you work your soil, or changing the type of crop or variety that you grow, or changing irrigation method or irrigation strategies. And this is usually possible because it is kind of close to their daily reality anyway. It's the methods they know, just slightly tweaked, maybe on all the aspects, and maybe you have to convince them. But if it's working and they can see that, they've been working the lands all their life, so that is relatively easy to convince them. However, hydroponics is something pretty different. So our method of introducing such a different method of producing crops also had to be a little bit different. Anyway, that's kind of the general overview. I'll come back to this at the end. But first, a little bit on the details of this case study that I'm going to talk about. I am not able to change my slides. Yes. So a little bit of background. I'll go over this quickly because it's not really the main interest here, but it is about soil salinization. Salinization is a global problem. We also heard it in the previous talk a little bit. And it's increasing through human activities, and climate change is exacerbating it as well. So yeah, salinization is the main issue that we're trying to help farmers with, how to deal with it better. Climate change is not only increasing salinization through various pathways, but it's also increasing the frequency and the magnitude of extreme weather events. Also all contributing to more extreme salinity and drought problems. And secondly, kind of attached to it, but in semi-arid environments, kind of by definition, freshwater availability can be a big issue. We are doing this research, or today I'll be talking about Egypt. Egypt is a large country, very dry, but with one major life-giving river through it. If you fly over it, it's beautiful. It's one big desert with a green snake through the whole country that fans out at the end in the Nile Delta, where everybody lives. Everybody lives either in the Delta or along the Nile River. The rest is a very dry and hot desert. It's a Delta country, just like the Netherlands, actually. But yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why they have salinity as a problem. as a result of this salinization and drought, their agricultural productivity is decreased, which is a big thing. I think 30% of Egyptians work in the agricultural related business. So yeah, it affects a lot of people. And that is why we tried to introduce a hydroponics. Hydroponics is a system where crops are produced directly floating on water. And because you have to build this basin, let's say, it can also be very effective as a water storage thing. Because normally in agriculture, you have two ways that water is lost of the system through evaporation and transpiration. Transpiration is the loss of water through the plants themselves. So together combined, they're called evapotranspiration. But the evaporation, so the water loss directly from the soil, just the water evaporating, that you don't have that in the hydroponic system. So closed, so you only have transpiration water loss. So it's a more water use efficient system, at least in theory. But we've measured all those things in this project, so I'll show the results of that. So this project is called CoSEAL Hydro, and we're trying to introduce these hydroponic systems at farmers in salt-affected areas in the Nile Delta. We have, for now, 4 locations, at least during this talk. Currently, 2 more are being built. I'll be going there in 3 weeks and visiting the 2 new locations. So it's going relatively well, but I'll get back to that in the end. So these 4 locations that we currently have is only 2 actual farmers. So 2, we have them at research stations, and 2 local farmers. And I guess that's a bit the point of this talk. One is younger, one is older, but again, N is 1. So I do not at all pretend to be able to say anything definitive about differences between younger and older farmers. However, it's not our first project, and we have been able to make some general, observations and interpretations. But again, this is not my work. I don't look at how do older farmers compare to younger ones. I've never studied that. I've not. So this is a big disclaimer that all I say is or I will say is because of personal observations and lots of talking also with the local researchers and local farmers. But yeah, it's all it's not scientific based into things I will say. So just keep that in mind, please. So in this project, we have a few main research questions. How do yields compare to yields in open field cultivation versus hydroponics? What are the effects on high water electrical conductivity? So that's salinity. I seem to have an older version of my presentation. But how do farmers adapt to this new system? And are there predictive variables that explain potential differences in adoption readiness? And we did this by a combination of looking through qualitative measurements and quantitative measurements. So we interviewed people, the farmers, people around it, other people in the agricultural production chain, and we've tried to compare those results. And I guess for the talk today, these 2 research questions are most relevant. Is it possible? Yeah, do they adopt it, and when if they do, why, or if they do not, why not? That's I guess what is most of interest here. First, a bit of results on the practical things. Does it work? Does it produce a good? Yes, it does. It's a lot more water use efficient. It produces a lot higher yields than in the hydroponic system compared to open field cultivation. Up to almost 6 times more per square meter or per hectare. So very, very impressive yield results and water use efficiency. However, this is not the only thing that matters, as we found out. Here on the right, you see some of my colleagues. We had some students also working on this project and colleagues from Delphi, one of the partners in this project, and the 2 farmers where we introduced this system. The one on the not far right is one of the students, but the one next to him is the younger farmer, and he's the most success story of this talk. But yeah, this is one of the interviews. close to his farm. So through the interviews, we found out that what the farmers perceive as problematic with these systems. The first one is the high initial investment costs. We put it there for them. We built the basin, and you have to have pumps, and you need to fertilize, and you need oxygen in the water. So they are very aware that that the initial investment costs are high. Then the second point, a weak integration with local markets. This is because initially in the project we introduced crops that we knew worked well. We've had a similar project in Vietnam. It's actually still running, and we knew which crops did well, at least in Vietnam. However, there was no local market for those crops. And for example, I've shown you some results of lettuce with 577% higher yields, I believe it was. It was a variety of lettuce that they do not eat in Egypt. So we had to learn the hard way, let's say, which crops were most successful. And then another complaint of the farmers is that they cannot grow every crop. I didn't go into detail in that, but hydroponics is not suitable for some crops. It's only suitable for, let's say, leafy vegetables, leafy greens, the stuff that you eat the leaves of. You cannot grow a carrot in it, for example, for quite obvious reasons, because it's grown in the water. But anyway, they perceive that as a problem, very understandable. So there was a general skepticism among farmers, and that's more fundamental, I think, because it was so far away from what they're used to. There were some advantages too. They did see that the yields were good. They saw that the product was very clean. They had less, pests in it because there's no soil. It's all relatively clean. You cut it off and it's ready for the market. You don't have to wash it or remove the bottom leaves. Or they clearly did see that. They also saw the improvement of water use efficiency. And that may be so, but water is for free in Egypt. There's no water pricing. So they saw it, but they don't really care. If they use groundwater for irrigation or Nile water, they just, there's the whole delta is full with channels of Nile water. And even though it's, increasing in salinity, they use it basically without limit. They use as much as they want. And it's not perceived as a very valuable and limited resource. However weird that may sound in such a dry country, but it's not so much in the mind of the farmers that's something to take into account. The hands-on demonstrations we did. Like I said, I'll be going there again in a few weeks. It's very important to be there often and to show and to explain and to show the fertilizing strategies and to how to maintain pH balances and oxygen levels. And it's very important to be there. Very, very, very important. That was very clear and came very strongly out of those interviews. And it is also ideal, which is we have in one situation, but not in the other, if the farmers help each other. So that is also something we heard in the previous talk, but because this is so kind of alien to them, this is relatively hard to achieve, harder than we know from previous projects, just adapting to salinity in conventional farming, let's say. So here it's kind of the same thing. What we have, quantitative versus qualitative. So yield, super high potential, very high yields, but they were still kind of critical about it because also they said, I need about 5 times more land to have the same production, but I have that land. So, what's the problem? I have plenty of land, so it's not perceived as a very big advantage. The water use efficiency, as I mentioned, it's they don't really value the water availability, which is I guess it's a higher level problem. I think government policymakers should address this thing. I can't blame the farmers for that, but it's something that certainly should change, especially given climate change and more extreme and dry events that are coming their way, most likely. So the adoption is unlikely to be driven by water savings. Technical complexity, I think that's a big thing. That one farmer that's doing good now, it took 2 years to convince him, but he's doing well now. But he's super, entrepreneurial. He's very eager to learn. He's young. But yeah, so for him, it took 2 years. And like I mentioned, we are now going to apply it in 2 more locations. So we are also learning, but yeah, we need that younger farmer to help us, because he's much more able to convince the locals than we are. Labor intensive, yeah, that they saw, that they see that it takes less labor. You don't have to go weeding because there's no weeds. You also have a bit reduced pest and disease management. So that was something that they clearly saw. But yeah, the investment cost was a massive. Yeah, they were very critical about that, and rightly so. It does take quite a substantial initial investment. So I'm already up to my conclusions, and I've wrote a few things down, but I will also say a few things that I didn't want to write down because of these things, that the disclaimer of the start. I didn't do any research into young versus old or something, but yeah, we have observations, and I've been talking also today and yesterday with some colleagues of my Egyptian colleagues in this project about their thoughts. So I'll share a bit. But yeah, even though the hydroponics performs really well and it has very clear benefits, adoption readiness is relatively low. We found through the interviews. Farmers mainly complain that it's too far from their common practices, so it's too alien to them. It's too weird. And yeah, like I mentioned before, the most successful farmer now sees after 2 years the clear advantages of the system, and he will continue after the project ends. So he's so convinced that he'll continue himself. The other farmer is less keen, and this is a pity for the project because he's older. He's very well known in the neighborhood. Everybody knows him. He's a high status local. I'm almost about to say celebrity, but people go to him to drink tea, and he's a very, very highly appraised man. However, as I also discussed this morning and yesterday with my colleagues, this is also probably why he's less likely to adopt our system, because he's a man of high status and he has been farming his whole life. It's harder for him to accept such a new modern type of technology that people from the West, they come and they introduce it and they say, it's much better because it saves water and you have higher yields. Yeah, well, the thought is more, who are you to tell me how to do it? That's too bluntly said, but these things that play in the back of everybody's mind do make a difference. Whereas the younger guy, I don't know, he hops around, he's so fast, he jumps over the hydroponic system, he's super keen to learn, and it's much it's easier to convince him. And we also have this same pattern very strongly in Senegal, where we have more farmers, but this is a normal agricultural project, what I said before, where we just teach them how to deal with salinity, but by tweaking their common practices, let's say. And there we also have that the young, the eager, the energetic ones, they are much more easy to convince, whereas the ones that have been doing it for a long time, for their whole lives, they're more skeptical about any change, and usually as soon as you take the plane back home, they'll return to their old methods and old farming ways. So that's harder. But that's basically all I can say about the topic of this webinar. That I am under the impression, and this is confirmed when I talk to our local colleagues, that the younger ones are easier to convince, But that is sometimes harder because that's sometimes, unfortunate, because it's the older ones that have more status. And if they adopt something new, other people would also do it. So they'll become kind of more ambassadors for your project. So again, I'm in my work, I come from a kind of a technical farming things, like how to improve things through irrigation, soil management, crop management, whatever. But also hearing this first talk, maybe it's also time for me to get a bit more into detail on how to appropriately address the knowledge transfer aspects, huh? The didactics, or I mean, I've heard in the first talk also being mentioned the farmer field schools, and like the farmers have the knowledge, and this we've learned and we apply, I think, properly in most of our projects. But the challenge in this one is that we're introducing such a novel kind of technology, and that requires a different approach. And we're learning, and kind of successfully. Other people are interested; they want it too. So it is working, but I'm sure that if we would have given this more attention from the start, we could have been more effective or faster, or anyway, in whatever kind of quantity you measure it in, but we could have been more effective, I'm sure. Anyway, that is it. That is what I had to tell today. So thank you all for listening, but also thanks for the Egyptian farmers, mostly, as I heard also in the previous talk. And of course, the colleagues of this of the consortium of this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Bas. Okay, sorry. My screen went black, and I was like, "What happened?" Okay, thank you, Bas, for your presentation. I think that there is always something more or better you can do, so that's something we all face. But I want to, before we delve into other questions, I want to ask immediately Bas and Sandra. So Bas, because you already mentioned that, okay, from Sandra's presentation, you could see that there are some things you did that there were in Sandra's framework, but there are also some things you could do more or better. So what are your intakes? Like, what do you think you could actually take from the CoSEAL methodology? And Sandra, that's also a question to you. So how do you think, like, while you're listening to Bas' presentation, what could you like advise them to incorporate from your experience, from your methodology?
But I don't know who is it the question to me or
so
something?
Okay, so you can answer first. Like what do you think you can take more from the framework, if you have any idea, and if not, then maybe Sandra can give you some hints, because you have a very, as you said, specific case study, yes. And I'm thinking that so the young farmer is so keen or eager to learn, and he already has the knowledge, the experience, so now he can start sharing, yes. And I was thinking that then you can start using this more down to top approach to spread the knowledge.
Well, it's almost too embarrassing to say, but I've already said it, so I can repeat it. But one of the first things we did is introducing crops that I don't eat, and that's pretty like I said, embarrassing. Like first ask them what type of lettuce they eat, and if they eat pak soy at all or not at all. And so that's a very, very, very basic thing. But what I've heard Sandra say as well, that you come there and you interview farmers, and they say, these researchers that come all the time, they don't ask us what we want to know about. They just research whatever they wrote their grant proposal for in their home country, and then they come here. But we don't necessarily have this interest. So I think, this is very broad, but for sure we can learn from the model that Sandra explained quite a few things like this. But then again, like we do apply models like that in our more normal, conventional farming projects. The problem with this one is that yeah, it's pretty new to them. This hydroponics. They like you cannot grow a crop without soil. Like you put the sand in a seed in the soil, and then that's how you can't just have water. So that takes a big leap for them to accept that it's possible, and they keep being critical and skeptical for a very long time.
Sandra?
It's interesting. It reminded me of a book called Ripples on the Zambezi by Ernesto Ciroli, an Italian economist who went out to the Zambezi River and was talking to the farmers, and they said, "Oh, you know, we can't get any money from our crops, and we don't know what to do." And so he was back in the town that night, and he was walking around the market, and he noticed that there were very few watermelons available, and people were wanting watermelons. So the next day he went out to the farmers and he said, "Well, I've got it." He said, "The market really needs watermelons, so you should grow watermelons." They thought, he's the Westerner, he's come from Europe and he knows what's best, so we'll plant watermelons. So he went back a few months later when the watermelons should be ready to harvest, and there were no watermelons. And he said, "Well, what happened to the watermelons?" And the farmer said, "Well, as soon as they were ripe enough to eat, the hippopotamus came out of the river and ate them all." They knew that they should not plant watermelons there because that was what would be what happened. But they were too afraid to tell him because he was the expert. And so the first thing that I do when I go into a village is I tell the truth. I'm not a farmer. And I want you to tell me how you farm. Why do you farm that way? What crops work here? What crops don't work here? How can we help you do it better? And I think, you know, Baz has already learnt the lesson. Talk to the farmer first. And that's great. And if I can convince one researcher of that, then I've got a big tick in my day. It's really good. But I noticed there was a question there earlier about the difference of people in the villages and do we have conflict and that sort of thing. There was one man in one village who was, his farm was at the head of the canal, and he had plenty of water, but the tail end farmer had very little. And even if he didn't need, even if the farmer at the top of the canal didn't need to irrigate, he'd still use the water because he had it. He was allowed to have it. We came along in another project and we taught him how to use a soil moisture measuring tool. And we taught other farmers in the village how to do the same thing. And when I went back about 12 months later, he was there, he was joking with all the other farmers and everybody seemed happy. And I said, "Hey, what's happened?" And they said, "Oh, he shares the water now because he knows he doesn't need so much." And so conflict had existed in that village with that farmer for a generation or more. But by him understanding and the rest of the farmers understanding that they didn't need as much water to irrigate, he shared the water that he had. And so we got over the conflict. To address the young and the old, in Pakistan, a lot of the young people have left the villages and gone to the cities to look for work. And so it's mainly the old farmers who are working there. And one old farmer that we had, he changed his methods, he changed his approaches. He was really keen, he convinced others in the village to do it. When his son came home for the Eid celebration, he saw what his father had been doing and he decided he'd come home and start farming again because it looked as though it was a viable option. So the old in Pakistan are convincing the young that there is a future in farming. And so we mainly work with old men and old women who convince the young to get on board. So interesting that Egypt is almost the reverse situation.
I would gently pop in because I've noticed that we have some questions coming from the audience. So Sandra, is it okay if I
Sure.
Okay, so Bas, there's a question about like this is quite a concrete question, specific one, so maybe it won't take long to answer. So, dear Bas, the presentation is very interesting. What is the initial cost of establishing this production?
Well, that depends a lot. That's very hard to answer, but first it depends on if you have so you need pumps that as I mentioned, you need water circulation and you need oxygen in the water, and if you require to acquire those pumps locally, it's much cheaper than if I bring them in my suitcase from the Netherlands, which we've done for Egypt, but we're also trying local products. And the same goes for all the things. You need plastic lining. You need to shade it, and local labor costs. It depends a lot. It depends a lot. It's not really possible to give a conclusive answer. Sorry, because you thought it was very simple.
Contact Bas if you have a specific location in mind.
Yeah, please.
Okay, so I have a question to both of you from I hope I will pronounce it properly. Dionysia Liria, senior Halophit ergonomist, independent researcher, and I will just read the whole question because it's quite long. So hello everyone, very insightful presentations. Thank you. I have experienced the diligent and inclusive approach as showcased by Dr. Sandra Heaney-Mustafa in Pakistan during the implementation of ASIP project. Having all the stakeholders involved is very important for the success and sustainability of a project. In addition, SAL doctors are doing great work on the ground on the proper practices adoption by farmers related to saline agriculture. My question is, how can we guarantee the successful momentum going and the impact continues for the farming communities after the completion of a project and funding ended? What processes should be in place before the closing of the project to ensure that the best practices will continue to be implemented even after the closure of the project?
That is always the challenge. But one thing that I know from getting feedback from 2 current PhD students in Australia who worked with me on a project in 2016 to 2020, that the farmers that we taught this method of working with farmers are still working with other farmers, and they're moving out to other villages. Women are moving out to other villages, speaking and teaching and learning from the other villages what their problems are and working together to help them solve them. So I know that that's been sustainable over that period of time, and I really believe that if we can train enough farmers, and both men and women, to work in this way, that we can have success. Now, we're asking farmers to go off and work in another village and their farms being left for someone else to manage, or maybe no one else to manage. But we've actually had in one location after the ASIB project where farmers in other villages have been willing to pay farmers to come and teach them. And in fact, in one case, we had a young widow who was working as a labourer on another farm to help supplement her income, who'd learnt new methods on her own farm, started talking to the owner of the farm, and he's now employed her to teach his workers, and his neighbour has also employed her to teach on his farm as well. So she's generating an income now by teaching farmers. So I think working at that grassroots level, building up the networks of people so that they know where they can go when they need help with a problem that they may not have encountered before, that they know that the researcher at this university can help me solve that. That's one of the most successful ways of working towards the future, I think.
Yeah, I just actually remembered that there are those studies which seem completely unrelated, or maybe not completely, but kind of unrelated to what we are talking about, which are studies in marketing on innovations, like or general innovations. And I remember there was a study on gossiping, which was it was like introducing new products. Actually, it was also pro-health products. I think it was something about like women hygienic products among like villagers, like poor villagers. And what they did, they actually like started gossiping, like women talking to other women. You know there is this product which does this and this, and that started spreading more and more and more. And I think there are these studies which show like how much momentum, so how much spread you need for the innovation to stop being an innovation and start being a normal, a standard approach to something. So I'm just like now it popped into my mind that maybe there is some potential here to like join knowledge from this area on how much spread of innovation and how much like local people you need to include, because from the question we received, it's yes, if there is only few people like in Egypt, like on this one farmer, the risk of just dying, the whole concept dying soon after the project ended is pretty high.
Interestingly, I was told by my colleagues in Pakistan that weddings are the great place for the women to gossip and get past this information onto each other. But then the most important thing is the pillow talk, where they convince their husbands to adopt the technologies. So you've got to get the women on side. And even though most men say, oh, we make all the decisions and we're in control, pillow talk is very important.
Yeah, but also I have a question about Sandra. What was your observation? Like, did the people in Pakistan, both men and women, did they tell you how it felt for them to be so much included, to be, you know, like really actually heard?
Yes. Yeah. When we did the story of change interviews with them, the biggest thing for them was they had confidence now, they had belief in themselves, that they were, even though their knowledge was different, that it was equal to the researcher and equal to the policymaker. And so they built confidence, and they were now brave enough to speak in front of these people that previously they would not speak in front of. And so it was, yes, they'd learnt new knowledge, but it was the actual building in confidence and the skill of being able to speak to people in public that really benefited them.
I'm also thinking that it requires the change in the like broader system. So like in academia, it's actually like teaching PhD students and then students, like you have to also listen to it's not only, you know, in the area of agriculture, in any area you should listen to people you are actually
absolutely.
I also remember a quite sad story from my colleague, a social scientist, who was once asked by one of the participants of the study. It was something about social inclusion of marginalized groups, and the participant asked him, okay, so now you came, you asked, you did your research, so what is going to be the result of that? And he cynically answered, well, we are probably going to have a very nice conference in a very expensive hotel, and that's it. So I think, like, you know, it was a researcher who did this research with such you know, quite cynical approach. So I think it's like the change of the mindset from, you know, in the academia, and then the policymakers who will actually listen to people who are coming from quite often humble backgrounds and are not heard of. And that's that leads me to the question to Bas, because you said you underlined several times that it's a pity that this older Egyptian dropped off. because he had so much status. So do you think if he was actually involved, like if he stayed in that, those people who are coming over for a tea to him would, by actually, I don't know, gossiping or maybe just observing what he's doing, would they would really try to incorporate the same techniques?
Yeah, I think so. I should clarify though that he's still part of the project. He didn't drop out. The thing is, he's just less keen, and he kind of ignores it. So he has it's just coincidental, but where his hydroponic system is located, it's very visible. It's next to a road, and it's actually right next to the place where they drink tea all the time. So if he would, maintain it a bit better, the plants would look better, and it would be also a better showcase. But because he's not really interested, and it's a tiny little side thing for him. But so it would, it's just unfortunate for those coincidental reasons. And again, like I really don't dare to attribute it to his age or anything. But there is something with age-related status issues in Egypt for sure. And if you there's one guy who works for the farmer cooperative there in the region, and he's very interested, but he doesn't have a farm himself. But he's also a very appreciated man, and he is interested. He's also of status and age. So if we could somehow get him to run one of these systems, that would be great, I think, because it's just that the one we happen to have chosen is not so keen on the whole thing. But and then again, the other one is, and he lives nearby, so they all know each other. They all gossip. They all go to the same market. So in that way, there is some hope and there's interest for sure. And like I mentioned, we're going to implement it now in 2 new locations. But I do very much agree with what Sandra said earlier as well, I think. Because we came from this basic question, like what is needed that things continue, CC's question. Thanks, by the way, CC, for that question. But yeah, it is some kind of number game too. You need a lot of people for things to become more mainstream, not an innovative technology anymore. So us with 1 or maybe 4 farms now, it's very early, but it is growing, and I hope that that it will continue to grow. It's just that it could have gone a bit faster, but
you've already learned a lot. I have one wrap-up question. So looking to the future, do you think, Sandra and Bas, what are the greatest risks for the communities if this generational knowledge about living in these areas, about these good practices, is not effectively passed on? Do you see any high risks of such situation?
Well, I'm not sure. Yeah, Sandra, you can go.
No,
first.
Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, no, just I think Sandra mentioned something about this as well. But I think in Egypt, at least, there's a bit of a risk that farming is not perceived as very cool. So the younger generation doesn't really want to. They want to go to the city. They want to go to universities and not be the 7th generation of a farmer. I think that's a risk, because that would mean we would lose this local knowledge. But we've also found many times that if you make it a bit more fancy, you get in satellite data or soil moisture measuring equipment, even that, or your own weather station or hydroponics, or whatever. I think there are ways to make it more attractive to youth, and I think that would be disastrous if we would lose that local knowledge. But
Yeah, I agree. Sorry.
No, I'm sure you have interesting things to say about it.
No, I agree. It would be disastrous if we lose that knowledge. But one of the things that we found is a lot of the older farmers in Pakistan are illiterate or semi-literate and don't use their mobile phones or have laptops or anything like that. But the young people in the village do. And so what we've tried to work with is to get the young people to record the data that the older farmer who's growing the crops is doing, and so that they're working together as a partnership on the farm. And there's been less out-migration since that's happened. But the reality is farms that years ago belonged to one farmer who had 4 sons, got divided into 4, who each had 4 sons, and that got divided into 16. And so the farms are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And one area that I think I would like to try to work on is to get more cooperation between those sons and grandsons to think about farming the whole thing as a farm again, rather than as a little individual plot. But I don't know whether we'll have any success, but that's just a little seed that's planted up in here for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was in the past. It was a huge problem also here in my corner of the world in Poland. Like actually, a long time ago, they passed the law that you cannot make it smaller and smaller and smaller because it's not effective. But it itself brought other problems. Sorry, I've noticed that there's one more question on another channel from Syed to Bas. He asks, in what ways do you see hydroponics contributing to climate change adaptation strategies, particularly in terms of resilience to droughts, salinity, and extreme weather events?
Yeah, well, I think there was quite a bit. There was a bit of data on that in my presentation. It works really well, and I didn't talk about it much, but you can also use kind of low salinity water to still produce crops without any yield loss. So in theory, I was going to say in theory it works really well, but in practice as well. It's a highly productive system. You use less water, so in all or not all the threats of climate change, but some considerable threats of climate change, such as increase in drought and increase in salinization, and it can be pretty successfully addressed by hydroponics. However, people need to adopt it. If they are skeptical about it, then yeah, what are you going to do? You can jump high or low, but if people don't want it, then that's the end. So that's what this project is about, to try and convince them by showing repeatedly, look how great it's working. But as long as water is not valued, even though we have climate change, and we know it will be more scarce and more extremely available, yes or no. Those are challenges.
Yeah, so keep up the good innovative work. And the last question I saw, it's from Kate, actually. So a question to both presenters: to what extent does the diversity of the farmer group have an effect on your interactions with stakeholders? For example, in terms of age, ethnic background, etc. Have you experienced any conflicts, unwillingness to pass the knowledge, and how have you approached them?
Sorry to jump in. I just wanted to say that Sandra has already implemented the answer in actually her first, I think the first one. So it's also partially answered, unless you want to add something. Yeah.
I was under the impression that, Kate, you wanted to add something to the question of Cici.
No, I think that was a great question about the exit strategy. So I think that indeed was a very important one. I'm also just looking at the clock, since we are running a bit over time, and unfortunately we need to finish soon. So perhaps any last closing remarks in regard to any question?
That was directed, I think, to Bas and Sandra. So
I guess, as I really believe that we need to regard farmers and villagers in general as being the most important people in the link, and that they have knowledge that we should all value. Even though it is different, it's still very valuable.
Yes, Bas, do you also want to?
I completely agree with Sandra. I've got nothing to add.
Okay, great. So thank you both for your wonderful presentations and conversation and insights. I hope that the knowledge and experience you've already gathered, you'll be able to pass it, and more people will implement your methods and your knowledge. So I hope you had the time to look in the chat to see the thanks you received from our participants, and if no, there are some some kind words. So I hope today's session has given us all a fresh perspective, and everyone will have something to think about later on. So have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good rest of the day. Thank you.